Welcome to the Fuel Pulse Show podcast. I'm your host, Eric Bjornstad, and I'm your guide through the ever-changing world of fuel. If you have not been with us before, the Fuel Pulse Show is for anyone who uses fuel or who has things that use fuel, whether that's at work in a professional capacity or at home. And that means it's pretty much for everybody, especially anyone who has a job or a professional responsibility that entails them taking care of fuel because they need to get the job done, whatever that job may be. So if you think that sounds at least a little bit like you, then Fuel Pulse Show podcast is going to be for you. So what are we going to talk about on today's episode? Well, we want to talk about a topic that isn't one that you find many people talking about at dinner parties, but it's definitely one that impacts thousands of people, thousands of businesses and professionals across North America, and that is the problem of storage tank corrosion. And today we have someone who is well versed in the technical aspects of that topic here to talk with us, walk us through the what's, the whys, and the hows of the issue. He is Patrick Smyth. Patrick started out in the tech arena, but then added diesel filtration to his resume around 2011 when he was helping out a friend. And since that introduction to diesel, Patrick has gone on to propose the corrosion mechanism that we're going to talk about today. And the topic of this podcast intersects very well with his professional expertise because he has been on the forefront of trying to get people to see the link between biodiesel and water and corrosion. And he first proposed this corrosion mechanism around 2011. And in that time, he has influenced a lot of people in the direction of corrosion research, including the EPA, after Patrick contacted them regarding their report back in 2015 or 2016. So since that time, Patrick has written corrosion articles for numerous industry groups, and he has been invited to present to the ASTM working group on diesel corrosion this coming July. So Patrick, it's not often we get to talk to somebody who is such an expert in such an important yet underestimated area. So Patrick, definitely welcome to the Fuel Pulse Show podcast.
Thank you very much, Eric. So we'll get straight into it. There's a lot to cover.
Okay.
You're right. In 2011, after doing a lot of research, because I was new to the field, but I found out that biodiesel and water are both polar molecules.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're polar molecules, they'll bond together and settle to the bottom of the tank. Why does that matter? Before biodiesel was introduced in 2006, basically diesel fuel was good forever. There's freestanding water on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You drain the water off once in a while and life is good. But starting in 2006, they added biodiesel, and in 2007, they noticed severe and rapid corrosion. So what I proposed was that biodiesel and water bond together, they settle to the bottom. They don't make a free water layer because the biodiesel prevents the water from touching. They form a layer. And this layer allows microbes to get in, expand their growth volume, and rapidly reproduce. Microbes make acids. So the bigger the layer, the thicker the layer we have, the more acids they have, and we have a corrosion crisis. So in 2021, the CRC came out with the latest report. So just last year, and in it they filled in a couple of the blanks that I was not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically this concept called a micelle.
Okay.
When a biodiesel does bond to a water droplet, you have a water droplet and the biodiesel head attaches to it. So think of a fuzzy ball.
Mm-hmm.
The water droplets in the core, the head of many biodiesel molecules touches the water droplet itself,
So you've got like
and
a
the ball
core
is right. It's like a ball, and the tail of the biodiesel, which is not polar, sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a core with water and surrounded by a fuzzy ball of biodiesel.
A micelle, yes.
A micelle. So this is key because this settles to the bottom. And what this means is that, first of all, filters can't remove the water. because for a filter to remove water, it has to touch the water, can't touch it. Second of all, it means that traditional water tests for tanks do not work. So if you do water paste, it won't pick up any water because it's protected by the biodiesel. If you do clear and bright, you still won't see anything because the water is protected by the biodiesel.
Okay. Well, there's definitely a lot to unpack, and you definitely pack quite a punch in your introduction there. So let's talk about a few things that you touched on. First of all, let's take a little bit of a step back. So let's talk about biodiesel itself, because there's a variety of people who tend to watch or listen to this show, and they have varying levels of technical expertise. Most of them have heard of biodiesel. Many of them probably know that you can find biodiesel in a very widespread manner in the fuel supply. I know here in the United States, you can put up to 5% biodiesel content in regular petrodiesel and not have to label it. You can just call it diesel fuel. Reason that is, of course, is because according to ASTM D975, which is the list of specifications, if you will, or property characteristics that governs biodiesel, 5% or 4% or 2% bio doesn't change the specifications, so they consider it to be essentially just the same. Now, in Canada, you're up near Ottawa. Is the picture, does the United States picture mirror the Canadian picture in that respect?
Blended biodiesel, diesel blended with biodiesel is identical across Canada and the US. We're 4%. The mandate, it depends on the state or the province you're in, but they're basically all mandated to use biodiesel. Now, by the way, I'm a big proponent of biodiesel use. Like for environmental reasons, and now with what's going on over in Ukraine, we have to get away from oil, foreign oil specifically, as quick as we can, and biodiesel is a great way to do it. But there are a few issues with biodiesel that can be simply addressed that'll enhance the safe adoption of biodiesel. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and that's an important point, because one of the things that I will say at certain points is, there's nothing that's 100% good, and there's nothing that's 100% bad. And we can say that renewable fuels like biodiesel or ethanol or renewable diesel, whatever you want to call those things, they all have good points, upsides, and they all have downsides as well. And so biodiesel itself has done a lot of great things for the people who have used it, but there are certain downsides that come along with it. And so that's why folks like you are trying to educate the professional mariners, the people who are more likely to use it in larger quantities, to tell them about the problems that it might have.
There's a smoking gun article written in 2007. This is a research paper that compared 100% pure diesel to 100% pure biodiesel. Biodiesel absorbed 15 to 25 times more water and absorbed it quickly, hit saturation in a day, because biodiesel is polar, so is water. So that's just the water content. So if we take B5 in the States, they have pure ULSD, there's very little water content, it's on the bottom maybe. And for argument's sake, we have pure 100% biodiesel, no water at all. But when they mix it to make B5, the biodiesel starts to pull water out of the atmosphere. It starts to form a layer of micelles at the bottom. Now, it takes time. It probably takes the number of months for that layer to build up.
Well, and that's important to point out, is these kind of processes, just like with ethanol and phase separation, for example, these kind of processes take time to happen. They don't happen, overnight.
So this layer grows, and it's an ideal layer for microbial growth. Before biodiesel, there were always microbes in fuel, but they lived at the water-fuel interface. And that's been described about the thickness of a sheet of paper. We now have a micelle layer inches thick on the bottom. Now, we all have printers at home. If you go buy a package of paper for your printer, it's about an inch thick and has 200 sheets of paper. So you've just increased per inch the growth volume of microbes by 200 times. And that's where the excess acids are coming from, and that's where the
Hmm.
corrosion crisis is now hitting us.
Well, and I mean, that's a good picture as to the scale of increase that you're talking about. But then if you go further and you consider that, yeah, even within that paper thin thickness of interface layer, the number of microbes that can fit into that layer, you're talking thousands, millions, whatever number you want to put on it. So you're talking about the number of microbes, the effect that having biodiesel and the way that you're talking about, the way that it affects and enables such a catastrophic or exponential increase
Yeah,
in the potential for holding microbial growth, it's really even more significant than people realize.
very much so. What you said about not labeling biodiesel if it's below 4 or 5%, I've gone into data centers, so it's
Hmm.
critical. Their fuel's good.
Yeah,
So the other fact
absolutely.
we have to talk on is the length of time diesel's stored, because that's
Yes.
a major factor. We'll cover that in a moment. But I've gone into data centers and I wouldn't say had arguments, but tell people
Discussions.
discussion points. Well, I
Yes.
said, well, biodiesel is mandated. And the guy said, no, I
Okay.
checked with my driver. I checked with my driver. He said, we don't have biodiesel. So well, call the head office, because they
Hmm.
don't tell the drivers either.
Yep.
If you typically will have 4 to 5%.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, it's only when you get above 5% that you have to label it as B whatever. Otherwise, they have it in there. It's not a matter of can, they do have it in there, but they haven't labeled it.
Yep.
You know.
This whole concept of micelles was just introduced. It was new to me, but introduced with the CRC report that came out last year.
Now, CRC is what? Coordinating Research
Research
Council.
Council. So it's an association of everybody and anybody
Hmm.
who's involved with trying to coordinate research on fuels and this and that,
Yeah.
from industry, from government, so it's a truly independent research organization, and they do great work.
Okay. Yeah. The CRC, I believe, thinking about the EPA report that came out in 2015 or 2016. Um, I don't remember if the CRC had anything to do with that did any coordinating work on that, so to speak. But I do know that, like you said, they've got a lot of influential and important players who have
Yeah.
stakes in trying to get better answers to this problem, and so you would
The,
expect them to be involved.
the EPA report was where I first made a major contribution.
Hmm.
I read the 2015 interim report from the
Hmm.
EPA, and they're talking about water bottoms.
Yes.
So I hemmed and hawed, and late Friday night, one night, I draft up a short email saying, hey guys, are you aware biodiesel and water bond together and make a layer which causes microbial growth? And I sent it off into the black hole of
Yeah.
bureaucratic Washington email servers,
Yep.
never expecting to get a call back. I got a call back, I got an email back 6 o'clock in the morning on Monday saying that we'll be back to you. They set up a conference call. We discussed it in depth with the fuel experts they have, and these would be big boys.
Yes.
And at the end of it, I heard nothing for the next 6 months. Then on I think it was July 20th at 11 o'clock, I was at the cottage, looked at the clock, the phone
Hmm.
rings, and it was Ryan Harrer, who's the EPA. They had a fellow from EPA who was in charge of the report, and he
Hmm.
said, hi, Pat, I just want to let you know the report's being published today, and thank you for your contribution. I said, well, being a good Canadian, you're welcome.
Uh-huh.
And then I downloaded, I think it was the first one to download it, and in it, they took what I'd suggested, and the concept of entrained water made it into the EPA
Yep.
report. So that was the start of it. And from then, I've been writing articles for various organizations like STI, the Uptime Institute, EGSA, diesel industry players who are,
Hmm.
again, the word's slowly getting out, but it's not rapidly getting out. The CRC report was a game changer because it brought micelles to the foreground, and I was able to discuss this with both Ryan from EPA and the head author, Dr. Fred Passman,
Yes.
who was head of the CRC report. And from those discussions, I got the invite to present to the working group on diesel ASTM.
Excellent. Yeah. Dr. Passman, I've had the opportunity to cross paths and discuss with
Oh,
him
you're
quite a
lucky.
bit on a number of things. He definitely is he's an excellent resource. He's done a lot of work on the microbial side because he's a fuel microbiologist.
Yeah.
I hope one day we may be able to have him on the show because he's really got some useful things to say. So it's pretty clear from what you're talking about that biodiesel is a heavy influencer of corrosion because of the way how it interacts with water, how it facilitates microbial growth.
Yes.
And we can take a step back and say, so we have biodiesel, whether we like it or not, because of national rules, the renewable fuel standard in the United States, whatever the Canadian equivalent is. Biodiesel is in our supply. And so if it has these problems associated with them, the two questions that come to my mind that immediately come out of that is how bad is it, or what are the effects that if I'm a manager of fuel or a manager of a storage tank, what can I see? What can I expect to see? And then what can I do about it? So talk about what can they expect to see. We're talking about corrosion damage in tanks. And
So go ahead.
well, I was going to say, fuel's not like it used to be, and storage tank life, if you want to put it that way, is not what it used to be. So what have you found, or have you seen anything about shortening of storage tank life because of this issue?
So this isn't me speaking, this is STI.
Mm-hmm.
This is PEI, the folks who organize all the gas stations. Storage tank life used to be 30 to 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're replacing tanks as little as 10 years. So I'm personally saying my guesstimate is it's dropped from 30 to 40 to 20 to 30. And those are for the big solid steel underground tanks. A new area that's come in the last few months is home heating storage.
Yeah.
So those are thin tanks that hold average 275 gallons. In my area, a farmhouse had a leaking tank. My insurance company paid $500,000 to jack up the farmhouse to remediate the soil. They came and inspected my house and went downstairs and saw my tank sitting beside my sump pump pole and said, we will insure you this year, but next year we won't. So this is major, it's coming. And we're not even talking about for the big storage tanks, if they have to remediate a large amount of oil, like that's massively expensive. So that's coming on its way. If you're managing diesel, biodiesel has changed what you have to look for. If you use water paste, you're going to probably find very little water if it's long-term storage, because the micelles prevent the water from touching the water paste. So, and surprisingly enough, if you have no water on your tank bottom, that would be an area of concern, because to my view, that water's been absorbed into the diesel and is forming a micelle layer. So what do you need to do? You have to run two tests, which haven't been common, but will become very common. The first is called a total acid number, a TAN test, which is obvious. If your fuel's acidifying, you want to find out. And I don't have the ASTM number for that off the top of my head, but it's
easily found.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Please, thank you. And the second test is something called a Karl-Fischer titration. It's called a KF short form. And what a KF does, it takes a fuel sample, runs a very low level current through it, breaks apart the micelles so you can sample the water. So I had some sampling I did in the last few years. I pulled it up, it was hazy, no freestanding water. The KF came back at 30,000 parts per million. And I did a series of 10 plus tanks. They ran from 3,000 to 30,000. I was shocked. I was stunned. And I couldn't understand it until the CRC report came out.
Yeah.
So what you have to do again is and these are inexpensive tests. They don't cost a lot of money. A KF and a TAN test.
Yeah. It's if you're a manager of a fuel system, in a professional capacity, those are tests that you pretty much need to bank on doing because, like you said, they're relatively easy to have someone do them for you. I mean, you're not going to have a Carl Fisher apparatus laying around. You're
No,
going to take a sample, you're going to submit it to a lab. In fact, we do one. That's one of the things that we do with our company is we
good.
facilitate that kind of testing, because the Carl Fisher test is kind of the, I'd say, the gold standard for telling you how much water is in your sample. Um,
Yep,
it's not part of D975. D975, which is again the slate of specifications that define diesel, it has a water and sediment test specified in there. The problem with that is it tells you water and sediment. So if you want to know how much water is in your tank or your sample, your fuel, whatever, the Carl Fisher test is going to tell you all of it. It's going to tell you free water, dissolved water, which is water you can't see, and the emulsified water. And
yep.
going back to the sample that you had, I mean, this sample, how much biodiesel was in this sample that you tested?
So here's the interesting thing about all those samples. I actually took 2 samples per tank,
Mm-hmm.
one mid-tank, the other
Yep.
at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Mid-tank was always below 100 parts per million,
Mm-hmm.
completely dry,
Okay.
but basically dry.
Yeah.
And the bottoms are super heavy.
Yes.
What it raises to my mind, so the water is being pulled out by the surfactants and biodiesel surfactant.
And it's also going down by gravity as well.
Right. Well, it's the weight. Biodiesel and diesel have similar molecular weight. That's why you
Mm-hmm.
can mix them.
Yep.
As soon as these biodiesel molecules attach to a water droplet, water's heavy, settles to the bottom.
Right.
Now, we're talking about this a little later on, but if it's pulling water out of the diesel, is it pulling the biodiesel out of the volume of the diesel as well? Because biodiesel is used for lubrication in diesel engines.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I have not tested. So it's new again to me, but
that's not something that I have heard, but hearing you ask that question, that's directly analogous to the issue of phase separation in ethanol, with ethanol gasoline. The the ethanol, once too much water has been absorbed by that ethanol blended gasoline, it will essentially combine with the ethanol that previously was fully mixed into the fuel, and it will pull it out, and then that will sink down to the bottom, and you've got fuel that is not very good to use, not very good to use. So yeah, what you're proposing, I would expect that somebody in the industry would be looking at that, but even if that doesn't happen,
so
everything
I'll
else that
have
you
to
talked
interject.
about.
I'll have to interject here. I've been
Uh-huh.
talking to, this is new. It's coming out of left field.
Yeah.
It's coming from somebody who's not a diesel expert. I'm expert on this very small sliver of
Right. Right.
information, and we'll get to it soon, but SEAJ 148 filtration, how to
Yep.
stop this. So that's where my expertise comes in, and because of that, and the EPA report, et cetera, and every time I've been challenged by the experts, it's always come back and saying, well, yeah. So I'm glad you know Dr. Passman. His research on biosurfactants, which is detailed in the CRC report,
Mm-hmm.
was also critical to filling out the whole issue with biodiesel. And we'll talk about that a little later on, but it's remember the term biosurfactant.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming up.
Yes, absolutely. And now, going back to the life of the storage tanks. So, storage tank life used to be, you said 40 years. Now we're looking at 20 to 30 years, if not before that. And, you talking about home heating oil tanks. A lot of our audience that are professionals that manage fuel systems, and they stay on top of things like that. But I can't imagine, being one of those homeowners up in the north. I mean, we're down in Florida, so we don't have heating oil down here. But up north, northern part of the United States, Canada, where you've got a lot more heating oil tanks, I don't know very many people who can afford to eat, $500,000 or whatever the insurance bills would be after
Hmm.
they have to make that kind of claim. And one of the things that comes to mind is with the whole thing with ultra low sulfur diesel here in the United States, and how when they were phasing it in starting around 2007, they had an exceptionally long grace period where, because they had to let the low sulfur diesel get worked out of
Right.
the fuel system. And so the rule was always that if it was on-road diesel fuel, it had to be ultra low sulfur diesel. But if it was off-road, like marine, like heating oil, then you were okay. But then around I'll throw out 2016, 2017. I may be off by a few years. They finally said, okay, now it all has to be ULSD. Ultra low sulfur diesel, because of a number of factors, including the way it has a higher affinity for water, and because of the biodiesel, more microbial growth, meaning
Yep.
more corrosion. And it's an out of sight, out of mind problem, I think,
Absolutely.
for homeowners. They think, oh, that just affects those people out there. But you have to wonder if this is a rising problem, how bad this problem is going to be for people, because it
Well,
is coming.
corrosion never sleeps. Rust never sleeps. Corrosion never sleeps. So this is incremental,
Hmm.
day after day, year after year. Now, this is where the length of term of storage comes in.
Hmm.
So if you're storing diesel for emergency backup generators, you're supposed to change it out every year or so. Nobody ever
Nobody
does.
does that. No.
All they do is top it up. So that fuel is sitting there and going bad, if you will, getting
Hmm.
acidified.
Yep.
These acids, by the way, go through the volume of the fuel. It's not concentrated. Once an acid's made, it dissipates,
Yep.
so it hits the walls. It hits your sensor equipment. For emergency backup generators, it affects the injectors.
Yeah, I
The
was going to
injector,
ask you if there were specific things relative to generators, emergency
oh,
generators, that corrosion hit. So talk about that.
ab- absolutely. So generators, they run at very high pressure. They're at
Hmm.
35,000 psi and going to
Hmm.
65,000. And that fuel is forced through micron-sized
Hmm.
holes with micron-sized needles that go back and forth to
Yep.
distribute it. Their efficiency depends on the spray pattern as well.
Hmm.
So we now have acidified fuel, and they test a gen set once a month, let's say, run it for a couple hours,
Yep.
turn it off. Acidified fuel is sitting on those needles, those orifices,
It's
through the
coking
whole
them.
system. It's eating them away. So your
Hmm.
spray pattern's getting screwed up. Your efficiency is going down. With a generator, of course, if you lose an injector, it stops. Item number two, if you have 6 or 8 injectors, the software on the generator tries to keep them in balance. And
Hmm.
even if they don't fail, if they get too far out, it shuts them down.
And this is for common rail diesel engines, right?
Correct, correct. So there's a huge risk, and in the past, because diesel has been so good a fuel, emergency fuel, the senior management of hospitals, data centers, they're not aware of this, and it's not being brought to them because it's a new issue.
Hmm.
So there will be, and there probably already has been, issues where hospitals, et cetera, have lost their backups. And it's nobody wants to admit this. If you're a data center owner and you rent out space, you don't want anybody to know your gensets went down. Like that's a bad thing. So it's kept relatively quiet, but it's coming to the forefront. Hurricane Sandy, I think something like
Hmm.
60% of
Yep.
gensets failed.
Yep.
So
Superstorm
it's
Sandy.
superstorms. And well, we just had this incredible, all the damage done through this massive storm that went through Southern Ontario up to Quebec was
Hmm.
downdrafts, downdrafts, just air falling
Yeah.
down, blowing over hundreds and hundreds of telephone poles. I just
Yep.
walked the rural area, trees on roofs, trees on cars. Like it's
Hmm.
terrible. So that's happening more and more often.
Well, and speaking about that, you're really speaking to the fact that these infrastructure systems are under ever increasing amounts of stress. They're getting older.
Absolutely.
The weather patterns are changing. We'll put it that way. So there's more stress on them. You talk about what happened in Canada. What I immediately think of is what happened in Texas
Yeah.
last year, where the entire portions of it went down because, well, for whatever reasons, whoever you want to blame, doesn't matter. It went down, and it means you have to have good backup systems, good backup fuel, and like you said,
You don't.
the old school managers uh, aren't as attuned to this rising problem as maybe they should be because that's not the way it used to be. Now, a good thing about this is if you're like a hospital or a healthcare facility, for example, in the United States, you have regulatory agencies like Joint Commission, and Joint Commission is you know I, every year or however often these hospitals have to get inspected. The fuel and the emergency systems are backup systems are part of those inspections, which means those administrators must pay attention to the state of their fuel. Um,
But, and this is where the but comes in.
mhm.
This is not a widely recognized problem. And that puzzles me till the cows come home because there's a simple solution. In 2010, SEA
Yep.
recognized, they have the only test that I'm aware of for testing diesel with biodiesel content. So they came out with a test. It's a two-phase test. I'm going to describe it a bit because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah.
important.
Let's talk about
But
that.
it's a two-phase test to show how this works. So what they do, they take a filter.
Hmm.
It's a two-phase test. First phase is pure ULSD.
Now,
I know
what
you'll
is
see.
this test called?
It's the J1488 test procedure.
Okay.
So J14, thank you very much. The number you're looking for is J1488.
J1488.
And 1488, updated in 2010. So that's also key because they had various versions going back
Yeah.
when diesel was great.
Hmm.
So there's two phases. First phase, pure ULSD. They inject 2,500 parts per million of water into it
Okay.
and run it through the filter. Now the water can touch the filter material. Every filter tested is 100%. It removes all the water.
Okay.
And that's the way, that's what we're used to. That's what we count on.
Yeah.
They then simulate a B20, 20% biodiesel.
Okay.
They drop the interfacial tension, technical term, down to 17 to simulate this. 2,500 parts per million of water through it. And practically nobody can get the water out. So there's
Interesting.
two companies I'm aware of so far. Now, I couldn't understand why they couldn't get the water out until I saw the micelle description in the CRC report.
Hmm.
So the micelles encapsulate the water. The water's never touching the filter material. So this water, by the way, is now going through your tanks, storage tanks, through your filters,
Hmm.
into your gensets. So you're getting a lot more water, which of course affects all sorts of things. So the fact that this test looks at pure ULSD and a biodiesel blend shows that at least SEA noted that there's a problem here. We have to address it. What they've done is, you remember the SpaceX prize, where $10 million for the first person to get the space. SpaceX didn't tell you how to do it.
No.
They just said, here's the prize.
Yeah.
So what SEA J1488 is sort of the SpaceX for diesel. We know there's a problem with biodiesel blended fuel. Here's the test procedure. You guys figure it out. So two companies I know so far have done it. I actually I manage one company's systems, and that's where I picked up all my knowledge. Because I'm sitting saying, here's all these issues, but my tanks are always good. Why is that? And hence started the trail where I've come to.
So J1488
Hmm.
If I understand what you're saying correctly, that tells you how well a given filter will separate the water out of a biodiesel blend.
Correct.
Um, the Are there particular kinds of filters, brands of filters that are better at passing this test or better doing that than others? Because the manager's going to say, well, okay, so biodiesel has this water problem, hangs on to it. I get that. I need to get it out. So how do I do that? And so, J1488 will tell you how well a filter does that. But, are there particular filters, given these problems, that do that satisfactorily?
So I keep away from the commercialization of one brand versus another brand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's not my role.
So maybe a
All
type
I
of
know
filter.
is that my install base,
Mm-hmm.
I test fuel. In fact, when I put one in, especially for a big data center, things like this, I say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here's a story about MISO. Well, MISOs are
Yeah.
new. Here's a story about biodiesel, corrosion, water, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And after we install the system, we run it for a set amount of time. I'm coming back doing a field test. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to test your water, and we're going to test your tan. Now, on the water side, every install that I have is always well within limits for water, particulate, and tan.
Mm-hmm.
Just never misses it. Next door is where this 30,000 parts per million is sitting in a tank.
Yeah.
And the tan is point. I had a tank of a tan of 0.29. Like the limits are 0.08. So 4 times the acidification level.
Yeah.
Like I was, again, was just shaking my head.
Sounds like they got something going on there.
So back to what you're talking about, the hospitals. This is a relatively new issue, just being recognized within the industry. So the agencies that manage this are starting to change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I got the invite to present to ASTM at the end of June. It's coming up, and then it'll take X number of months for it to work through the system. They will
It always
confirm
does.
everything we're saying. It always does, but there will be changes, and it's coming quickly, relatively.
Yeah. So for somebody who's managing a system and like I said, I understand what you're saying about biodiesel. I understand that it leads, I might expect to see corrosion. Um, are there particular parts of the tank that are more prone to seeing corrosion damage than others?
So the tan tests I've done are consistent throughout the volume of the fuel. So
Mm-hmm.
wherever fuel's touching, and then there's tans that go, acids that go into the vapor space as well, which I
Yeah.
don't really address that much.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Well, I remember
but
the EPA report talked about vapor space corrosion.
yes, absolutely, absolutely, it's what acids do when they. So again,
Okay.
out of my expertise, so I can't address that.
Yeah.
But so tan is throughout the wherever the
The
diesel
butt.
touch is. So you're going to get consistent corrosion through the tank, but there's something called biofilms.
Mm-hmm.
And biofilms are layers and layers of
Yes, they
microbes,
are.
one atop of the other.
Mm-hmm.
They concentrate corrosion underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a biofilm, you're going to have excessive corrosion underneath that. And if you've got sensing devices, I've seen corrosion on some of the ball floats to
Yep.
prevent overfilling of a tank. So
Mm-hmm.
the cage itself gets corroded and the ball's jammed. That's not working. STP shafts just
Mm-hmm.
almost gone. So there's the bolts. Anyways, it's shocking to see. And initially, people didn't quite believe it. This whole thing started, by the way, because STI started to get sued.
Yes.
And that was because in 2007, they put in tanks. 2006, they put a tank into my gas station. 2007, I've got some corrosion. Well, STI, come
Mm-hmm.
fix it. Oh, it can't be our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it
It's
starts.
always somebody else's a problem in the beginning. It's always somebody else's fault.
So one thing about gas stations versus emergency backup generators, again, is the time of storage.
Yes.
So if you had clean, clear fuel, non-tan fuel, acidic fuel going into a gas station, it should turn over quick enough.
High turn.
That one, it should. The issue, and this is addressed in the EPA report in 2016, is there is long-term storage for diesel that goes to gas stations. It's in the terminal storage.
Yeah.
So the big tanks, I would love to get a couple of samples from the bottom of those tanks. Like it's, so solutions. Let's not talk about problems, solutions. And the same for home heating. The fuel that comes out of the storage tanks should be filtered with J1488 to remove all the micelles. Then you're delivering dry fuel. Biodiesel does absorb water quickly. So for things that turn over fuel quickly, like gas stations, not sure if they need anything more to keep it under if they have dry fuel to begin with. For emergency backup generators, because biodiesel absorbs so much, they will probably be putting a bolt-on J1488 system on the tank.
Okay.
That's probably what's going to be required. For the terminal tanks, so that's fine. Let's filter the fuel coming out of the tank. I would love to see the inside of those tanks. I did a site in right beside the ocean. I won't name the place. It was a ferry terminal.
Yep.
And we installed the emergency backup for the building and stuff. And I'm looking up the rocky escarpment, and they have these two big diesel storage tanks. And when those things leak, all of that's going straight into the ocean.
Oh.
So it was just one of those, you're shaking your head and saying, I can see it coming. When it's going to come, don't know, but it's coming.
Yeah, I would hate to be the person who would have to face the liability bill, so to speak, when that happens.
It's sad to say until it's public that somebody's died or something like this happens, that people start to say, oh, okay, yeah, we better get on this now. And that's the stage we are.
Yeah. So 1488 filtration, you talked about biofilms, which is definitely an interest of ours because we do a lot of microbial testing for fuel to try and show microbial levels because they are so linked to corrosion. And so you talk about biofilms, it's interesting. Biofilms, sometimes there's a question if somebody has biofilm, if they've been able to find that they have biofilm present in their tanks, sometimes they don't think that it's that big of a problem. It's not going to do anything. But there is a link between biofilms and corrosion because of some of the specific mechanisms where if you have biofilm on a solid surface, you can get things like oxygen concentration. You get osmotic movement of oxygen between fuel and water. So if you have a water phase, and I don't know how this intersects with the micelle issue, but if you have any kind of free water phase and you have free water down here at the bottom of the tank, you've got fuel up here, and you've got biofilm kind of maybe at the interface, but also on the sides. And the oxygen will move from the, I believe it's the fuel into the water because fuel actually holds a higher ppm of oxygen than water does. And so that oxygen will want to move from the fuel to the water. And if there's biofilm there and there's microbes around that, some of that oxygen can get trapped in that and create an area of high oxygen concentration. And that's the perfect thing that microbes need to form additional acids, which then contribute to corrosion. So, I mean, things are always more complicated than people want to believe, but suffice it to say that if you have biofilm in your system, then you've got a microbial problem you got to get rid of first of all. But the second thing is you need to remediate that because it's highly linked to corrosion and, it's going to bite you sooner or later.
You can, in fact, have water with biodiesel if the biodiesel hits saturation. And then it'll just precipitate out. And the other, talking about biofilms, something I learned, again, from Dr. Passman. Biosurfactants.
Yes.
So I did not understand this until he educated me on it, and thank you very
Hmm.
much, Dr. Passman.
He's good like that.
When microbes form, grow into the micelle layer and start to reproduce rapidly,
Hmm.
they produce acids. They also produce surfactants
Right.
called biosurfactants because they're made through a living organism.
Correct.
These biosurfactants then go up and create more micelles from new water that's being absorbed in from the
Hmm.
atmosphere. So how did I get 30,000 parts per million of water on a bottom? I could not understand it. Well, because the microbes are making acids and more surfactants, which grab more
Hmm.
water on and just run a cycle. Now, if they're working with the oxygen portion as well, like it's just not a good news story. So I would suggest to anybody who has a tank, especially long-term storage, do all your regular testing. Also add tan and a
Yep.
Carl Fisher.
Yes.
And that's to assure you of the new findings, how acidified your fuel and is the water being absorbed into micelles? And if you've got biodiesel, the answer is yes. But seeing is believing.
Absolutely. We yeah that intersects with what with what we recommend, which is at least yearly. You want to do something like that. Um, doesn't mean you have to do it every month or anything like that, because there is such thing as over testing. But um, even if you do it once a year, you do a tan, Carl Fisher. Some of these other ones, depending on how it's depending on what role who you are and what role your fuel plays, like if you're a hospital. And we also typically recommend microbial testing at least once a
Absolutely.
year.
Yep.
Microbial testing is a story for another show, because you can get really complicated. But I think all of this speaks to the importance. It's more important than ever to pay attention to what's going on in your systems, and to start considering, I would say, the value of testing, because I think in the U.S. certainly we're very reactive. We want to solve the problem after the problem has become a problem. We're not always so eager to spend time, money, resources to do the preventive things to keep it. And testing is, certain aspects of testing they're preventive. They give you a sight line of sight on if a problem is likely to develop. And certainly that person who has that what 30,000 gallons, those tanks up on the up above
Oh.
the ocean, that's probably something they want to consider.
So one other thing, what I recommend for folks who have long-term storage, whenever they get a delivery, take a liter,
Mm-hmm.
store it, label it, and store it. I've been called back a couple of times where one time particulate went through the roof. Can was fine and water was fine, but they're
Uh-huh.
saying your filters also do particulate. Yes, we do it very well. So what's up? And anyways, long story short, had you had a delivery? Yeah, we had a delivery last week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I did another sample like a month later, and the numbers were way down. So it points at that. More serious one. One major organization had a tank that they weren't using a lot, so they
Yep.
pulled fuel out of that and filled up one of the tanks that I filter.
Yeah.
The tan went through the roof. So the systems can get water up pretty quickly if they can remove micelles, they remove it.
Uh-huh.
The particulate was cleaned out, but the tan level shot up, and I was puzzled until I found out. I said, "Have you had a delivery?" Because I'm thinking now the terminal is delivering it. That would
Mm-hmm.
be bad news. They said, yeah, we did. We pulled some fuel out of one of our other tanks. I said, okay, we need to go sample that tank because I will promise you that tank is not in good shape.
It probably would have been worth their while had they known to do a microbe test on that,
Yeah.
because it's highly likely that they just inoculated another system when they transferred fuel from one to another.
So one thing I will say is that I've tested fuel coming out of the filters.
Yep.
14 parts per million.
Mm-hmm.
So that's incredibly low. And that's where we say is that if we can keep water below 200 parts per million, which is the warranty level for gensets, by the way,
Yes.
then we will control corrosion. Effectively, if you have a genset, even a brand new genset, odds are you're out of warranty with your first litre of fuel. And the reason for that is that if you look at the warranty documents from all the genset manufacturers, they have pages and pages on biodiesel and the issues. They understand this stuff really, really well. Then they have, I call them onerous, but they have procedures you have to follow to ensure your fuel keeps good. Nobody does this. So when they have a warranty claim, they're asking for fuel samples and denying the claims. So that I've seen that more and more. It effectively you could say that genset manufacturers have no liability because it's the fuel that's causing the problem, and the fuel is the owner's responsibility.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to dig a little more. This may be a topic for another show, but it would be interesting to dig a little more into what you're saying about what those genset manufacturers are requiring from the end users. Because I can guarantee most of those, I won't say all, but the vast majority of them don't have any idea that that's the requirement until they go to make a claim.
The owners of the tanks?
Yeah.
Owners of the gensets, yeah.
Yeah.
They do not. They do not.
Yeah. All right. Well, Patrick, where can people find out more about what you do if/when they need to?
Okay, Patrick Smyth. My company name is interesting. It's Octane Systems Inc.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm a pilot. I had my own plane at one time, and we're always talking about octane issues. So I like the name. And I get the jab all the time. Well, it's cetane in diesel, not octane.
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. So Octane Systems, if you wouldn't mind putting information at the end of this, that would be great.
Absolutely.
And happy to talk to anybody, but especially if you have life services, if people's lives depend on your gensets, obviously the hospitals, but fire halls, police stations, water treatment plants, and waste water treatment plants. If that fails, you have sewage backing up to people's basements. So on the political level, that's not a good thing.
Well, you know, it's funny here in Florida, that actually happened onto some of the municipalities. It was probably, I want to say it might have been 3-4 years ago. It was before the last hurricane, but some of the local systems, their generators failed, and there were a number of places where exactly what you just said happened. They had sewage water backing up, and people weren't that happy about it.
No.
Yeah.
But if the water goes, then you've got, like I say, we were out. Still places be out for a week. But if you can't get your well going, you're moving out of there, or you bring a lot of bottled water in.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, it has been very much a real pleasure having you with us. We've learned a lot, and thank you very much for joining us and for sharing, your expertise and your perspective on this issue, which is a little bit more specialized than some of the ones people are used to dealing with. So it's always good to have someone on like yourself who knows so much about this kind of issue. So we really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, and that about wraps up things for today's episode of the Fuel Pulse Show. Thank you so much for spending part of your day or night with us. Check the show notes for notes on some of the things we talked about that we mentioned. Those are located at our website, www.bellperformance.com. Please make sure to subscribe to this podcast at iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you choose to get your podcast from. And then last but not least, if you liked what you heard, please take a little bit of time to rate us because that is very important in getting the word out and helps people find us. So until next time, I am Eric Bjornstad, and thank you for joining us at the Fuel Pulse Show podcast.